I'll be completely honest, I did not expect to make a Pantheon video this soon after a 100-hour review. Yet here we are. One of the most important features and one of the biggest reasons to play the game isn't in the game just yet, and you probably don't even know what it is. By now, thousands of players have gotten into Pantheon to find the bones of a game that truly feels like the spiritual successor of EverQuest. Its challenging combat, its shared world dungeons, group dynamics, and even classes that look and feel very similar. But the one feature that has been sorely missing in the game to enhance it, well, it's perception. And we got to see it live in action being built from the ground up today in a stream from the creative director, Joppa Perkins. And that's why I'm making this video right now. Even though I had like some other videos on like Dune Awakening and stuff that I really need to get out to. What is perception? Well, in brief, it's how the world and the player will interact. More specifically, it is a system of these interactions and a flagging system within the game that creates a sort of bespoke experience that evolves as you play and serves as a way to encourage world exploration. Think of the flagging system in Planes of Power, but much more intricate and less raid driven. In fact, it's probably much closer to say that this is more like an RPG experience, more like a, say, Baldur's Gate 3 type experience. Although I don't want to put that kind of pressure on them for this. To talk about it, we have to break it down because there's three main parts that I want to talk about and a fourth one that is a bit up in the air. And three of them, we've now actually seen them either in-game or on stream in development. Those parts are the perception pings, the branching dialogues, flagging, and finally, the keeper role. Perception pings are the little pings and the UI element that scrolls across your screen that currently exist in game. These are designed in a way where they are supposed to give both flavor text, like this one in Avelia, or this one down in Halnir Cave. Shortly after getting this video, I died. Halnir Cave is scary, even with your friends. But they could also lead to more important information, lead you to more pings. I haven't been able to locate it recently, but there were these pings in game that would lead you to an area of hobgoblins in Avelia, basically taking you along this journey to go find the goblins just through the pings. It was encouraging you to continue to explore. But this is just the first phase of this. Ideally, with the given role that we'll talk about here in a moment, you'd actually be able to investigate further once you get the first ping. Perhaps find out more information about the area, or potentially lead to a quest or something else. These pings are your entry into the world in a sense. We'll circle back to these pings here in a moment when we talk about flagging, but I really want to talk about this other thing that we just got to see, which is not actually in game yet, but I'm hoping comes very soon. Branching dialogues. It's the thing that we got to see made on stream by Perkins.
So from here, let's think of what we could do from this moment. So he wants to talk to us. So that's what we're going to do first, is we're going to set up our first bit of dialogue. And this is the first time we're going to do like a branching dialogue. And this is one of the really cool things about the perception system, is that it's not just opening a dialogue window and accepting a quest. There's actually going to be, you know, choices that you can make in your what you say and how you respond. So we need to come up with something where there's two different outcomes based on how you respond.
When you think of questing in MMOs, by and large, it's binary. You get offered a quest and you have two choices: accept the quest or decline it. Branching dialogue is more like what you'd get in an actual RPG, with different dialogue choices that lead to different outcomes. This is where Pantheon really has an opportunity to use this perception system to set itself apart from being painted as nothing more than an EverQuest clone, even though nothing more than an EverQuest clone is enough for thousands of players to truly enjoy the game.
The idea here is that you have a decision to make, and based on your decision, and again, you're not, that's the thing, like, you're not going to know this ahead of time. And that's part of what everyone needs to get comfortable with, if you can, with Pantheon. And that is, if we're going to have branching dialogue, if we're going to lean into this classic kind of, truly classic RPG approach, that means like there are going to be things you're going to make decisions on, and you might wish that you could go back and do it differently.
But wait, doesn't that mean if you can miss things, if you can only make the choice once, won't you just miss out on parts of the game? Yes, that's kind of the point. In fact, missable things were one of the reasons why Baldur's Gate 3 was such an impactful game and continues to have well over 100,000 players almost 2 years after launching, because there's replayability there. There's separate things. You will get a different experience. That is what kind of sets this system apart from, say, a Final Fantasy XIV, where everyone is kind of following this chosen one narrative. Even Star Wars: The Old Republic, which probably has the most similar version of this, a game where there are quests that have different choices, that can have different outcomes. It's not this organic world thing that is the same way. That's still a sectioned off piece of the game that is tied to this long arching narrative. This feels different. This feels like the kind of thing where you and your friend could both go into the same quest but have different results to that quest. You could miss out on the quest completely because you picked the wrong answer, while someone else gets the quest. Or perhaps one part of the quest, if you answer one way, it gets someone to attack you, but in another way, it gets that person to give up their loot without the attack. It'd be very interesting to see how far they take this, and it's really just, it is the system in Pantheon that is the most exciting to me because of its potential.
All right, let's see. Now, so here we go. We've got our so in Pantheon text, anytime you see italicized text inside of brackets, this is meant to be like an emotive. So these are things you're perceiving. This is information that's coming to you by way of just observation. And this just allows us to kind of paint, a little bit of a picture with words and whatnot. But you've got a branching dialogue here. So yeah, it's like the DM talking exactly. It's the same as like the perception pings that you'll get, that it's just kind of it's setting the table. It's giving you some flavor, some insight. And in some cases, like what I tried to do very frailly here, but the idea that his eyes are moving back and forth quickly as he's beginning to speak, as this character kind of unfolds for you, little touches like that can be used to kind of, plant seeds, establish clues along the way, just through the emotive activity of what kind of person this might be. So I've got some options here. I didn't connect anything to the Twitch chat one, but if I choose yes I am, then it'll take me to the next window. It's using the same chat prompts because I'm doing this quickly. But also if I say no, then I would have like a farewell, something in there, and you could close out the conversation.
So how does all this work? Well, all of these are tied to another layer of the game that'll be familiar to players of MMOs in general. flagging. This flagging is already in the game, at least at a rudimentary level. There are some NPCs who will respond specifically to your class, just as Joppa set up on the stream, with the NPC he added responding to a monk but no other class, or this specific locations that are flagged to give you the perception pings, as well as not hitting that same ping every single time you go over that perception area, but having an internal cooldown on it. But the idea behind the flagging system is that it will tie everything together. So perhaps you only have that interaction with the NPC and the branching dialogues not just because you are a monk, but because you are a monk who went to a specific place in Halnir Cave and got a perception ping there, and that you investigated that ping. The way this was explained in the past was essentially a tiered flagging system with basic flags like race, class, level, and faction, and then more specific flags like killed X NPC, looted item Y, has traveled to location Z, whether it's currently day or night, etc. If you start stacking those flags on top of one another, you get to see the potential of a system like this, but also how difficult it might be for a small team like Pantheon, which is reportedly about 10 people at the moment working on a system like this. It would be tough to manage. One of the things that I've talked about in the past is actually Star Wars: The Old Republic and how they kind of ran out of runway for their class quests and then eventually turned into these branching but still single quests of like this grand narrative that they did, because it was just too much to basically try and run several RPGs all at once in a single MMO. That's why I think a system like this is actually infinitely more manageable, because you're not actually creating bespoke content for every single person. You're creating these little branches of content all for everybody. So potentially everyone could pick options A, or everybody could pick option B, but more likely you're gonna have people picking options A, B, C. So you're building out one set of content and then having it branch out from there, and thus creating additional content and more of a bespoke experience for each player, without having to really create these individual class-like stories the way that they did for Star Wars Republic. And of course, not having to do cinematics or voice acting goes a long way. But still, it's work. It's a lot of work. A quest that has branching dialogue that only 10% of the player base will see is an easy choice for Larian Studios with several hundred people making their game. But that time investment for a game like Pantheon with 10 people, well, it's much less so. But if Baldur's Gate 3 has shown anything, it's that kind of variance, that missable content, that content based on choices and decision making can be incredibly powerful. Missable content is a scary, scary thing for an MMORPG. But if you really think about it, just about every single MMO has missable content. Not every player is going to play every raid. Not every player is going to do every single quest. There is missable content across all MMOs. So I don't think when it's coming down to that kind of calculation, it's that bad, especially if you can make that missable content sought after. If you can make it something that players like, wow, I really want that experience. Because not every player just wants to go out and kill things. There are a lot of players that do, but some players still want a story, not just a game story like a Final Fantasy XIV, but a world story, lore, world lore. I'm players. I am that player. I'll be honest. But at the same time, don't worry too much, as the perception system has historically been described as a way to enhance content, not block it. Perception itself is a system that is coming to Pantheon, and it's there in parts, and it will continue to be expanded upon over time. It, like adding NPCs and other zones once the system is fully implemented, is more heavily dependent on just simply time itself. Creating the content, writing the dialogues, writing these branching quests, adding NPCs to the world, adding lore pings to the world, adding reasons to go out and explore. And doing all of this in a way that is consistent with the world lore and that actually feels part of the game and part of the tone that they're trying to go for. But it's also, in my mind, one of the most important features that Pantheon can add to really make this game leave an incredibly memorable experience. Not just the social experiences that they're already making memories with, but also story experiences that make people want to know more about the world and the lore that they are inhabiting in Pantheon. The same kind of experiences and feelings that I got as a kid when I played EverQuest, and I really wanted to know more about why were the Dark Elves at war with everybody? Why were the Ixar hated by literally everyone? What were the things that made those things that way? But doing it so that it's a way for players to go and experience those things themselves and share those experiences with their friends. Like, hey, did you see this happen? No, you didn't. Well, look, this is what happened when I did it. Like, I got this one perception ping here, that kind of thing. Sharing that moment, those really impactful moments. But there's still one fourth part that I'm actually not sure about because it hasn't been mentioned all that much, or I've just missed it. And it's the fourth part, the Keeper role. Much of this, all of this perception system in previous iterations, was tied behind a role in the game called the Keeper, a role in addition to your class. With the Keeper role, you would get a Tome of Keeping, which served as a sort of quest log that helped you keep track of all your clues and perception triggers. To me, this made me think of the Tome of Knowledge that you had in Warhammer Online. That tome and the Keeper role were exciting to me as a sort of progression in the game separate from the primary leveling path. Kind of like crafting. In order to use the perception system, you would have to advance this Keeper role. I am not sure if this is still the case, and I'm not even sure if that's a good idea anymore. I think opening this up to everyone is probably the best, though if the Keeper role acted more like, say, a harvesting skill or climbing or swimming, a skill that everyone gets, and that you got to raise by, well, going out and doing things like going out and finding locations, finding a ping about lore, investigating that ping, and then getting some of your skills by doing that. Well, that sounds pretty damn amazing. A non-combat form of progression in the game that actually encouraged you to engage with the world itself and go back to places to find out more. This is one of those things that once they start to have more branching dialogue in the game, I'm going to be infinitely more excited than I already am. In fact, this was actually my primary negative that this isn't in game when I released my 100-hour review of Pantheon right here. In that I go over the good, the bad, and I jump off a cliff. You know what? It makes sense when you watch it.